Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.
You ain't getting no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one. I'm the certified deal closer.
Welcome to Coinology, the podcast. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Coinology. And we have none other than Ashley Love Mills in the studio. Y'all give it up for Ashley. Hey Ashley, how are you?
I'm doing well and blessed.
Okay, so I hear you in town for a short period.
Yeah.
Okay, where do you live now?
So I'm actually between here in Atlanta and sometimes Las Vegas too. So I'm playing this nomadic lifestyle right now.
You said here in Atlanta. This is Atlanta.
Oh,
so.
Excuse me, between here and LA.
Okay.
And LA and Vegas too.
All right, LA, Vegas, and Atlanta. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, I know by the time this airs, this will probably be historical information, but I'm sure you saw what happened last night in LA. As far as the fires. Yeah. Where are you know if any of that was impact to you?
No, not to me. And I've checked on all my family and friends that are out there, and everybody doesn't live. From what I've seen, it's like Malibu area, and I think Santa Ana too. So thankfully, God has protected all of my people, but it's really sad, and I was really shocked to hear about all.
It's still going on though now, right?
It seems like the fire season seems to have it's been drawn out because normally that ends around October, November every year. So the fact that we're in January and it's still going on is actually really insane.
It's also insane to me that we are, a couple of days into the new year and we've had so much tragedy. Something I just thought about this morning coming in here, and I think you probably can appreciate this being in the entertainment industry. 2 major cities that were supposed to house 2 major events that are coming up. We had situations that just happened that's making people pause for the cause. Mm-hmm. One in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. We also, had the Super Bowl coming up. And from what I heard, the Super Bowl hotels are completely, at first they were sold out, and the rates were extremely high. What I'm hearing now is that people are releasing their rooms, and you can get a room now for the Super Bowl for $100 and something a night.
Wow.
And now you're talking about the Grammys at the end of the month, LA. So I wonder how this is going to impact these cities. And I wonder if there's some type of message that's behind all of this.
Yeah. I think that is definitely going to be impacted, particularly in New Orleans, because of all of the tragedy and all of the people that passed away there. But I think the message across the board is gun control. We got to do better. Our government has to do better when it comes to stuff like that and protecting the people, because that's really what it's about. But
let me say this though, Ashley, gun control wouldn't have stopped this situation because he used the vehicle.
And that's true too. I think there's been a lot of conversations in New Orleans about Bourbon Street and things that they can do to better protect Bourbon Street. And then beyond that, the racism and the xenophobia that I think sort of drove that terrorist, and the media is saying, they're not sure if it's a terrorist attack. It's 100% a terrorist attack when you are targeting innocent lives. It doesn't matter, race or whatever. It's terror. You're terrorizing people unprovoked. And that's, I think, they need to focus on. It's really, this is one of those things where there's not just one answer. It's not so black and white, because there is so much turmoil in this country right now. We're so divided in so many different ways, and we need better leadership that's going to help to really bring us together. And I know that sounds cliche, but we have someone that is coming into office that thrives off of spewing out hate and doing everything to create confusion. And when those things happen, it spills over into the lives of everyday people. And I'm not saying that, President-elect Trump is responsible directly for what took place in New Orleans, but it is the rhetoric that he has used in the past, as well as other people, that I think that has influenced these sort of acts.
And I think the real thing is we don't really know what really truly happened. We're only going off of what the news has told us. We are being told that this is the person that did it, we really don't know, do we?
No, we don't. And that's the thing too, is like we also live in a day and time when there's a lot of misinformation, and I'm not sure if it's necessarily coming from the media because they are lying to us or they're not, giving us the full truth. But I think that it's important that transparency is always offered in these situations. And that's something that, the police department and our government also need to do a better job of. So I feel like we are really at a standstill, and just because of the way that the United States of America was built on the backs of slaves and stolen from indigenous people, it is imploding on itself. And that's just my personal opinion. I think there's some truth to what I'm saying, but ultimately, when you're building a country that's based on capitalism and oppression and suppression and things like that, it's only a certain amount of time before things begin to go crazy. And it's literally a shitstorm, in my opinion.
That's it. It's the days and times in which we live in. But let's go back a little bit, Ashley. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
Born and raised there. My parents are from North Carolina, and my dad was in the military, and he retired in Orlando.
All right. So you are a Southern girl.
Yeah, I think so. I was raised in Orlando, but I left and moved to North Carolina when I was in high school. My parents separated, and because they're both from North Carolina originally, my mom wanted to move back to be closer to some of our other family and my grandmother. And a lot of times I tell people, I'm from Orlando by way of North Carolina through Atlanta, down in Los Angeles, and back and forth and all the way around. But I still consider myself to be a Georgia peach.
Are you an only child?
I was raised as an only child. I have 5 half-brother and sisters from my dad's side, from his earlier marriages. But I was raised as an only child, latchkey kid all the way.
Okay. So was it difficult when your parents separated? Did you understand what was going on at that time?
Yeah, I did, to be honest. And to be quite frank, I think I was maybe about 8 when from myself, I was like, they don't need to be together.
Okay.
I didn't fully understand what the issues were between them, but I knew that something functionally wasn't right.
So you knew this at 8 years old? Okay.
Oh, yeah. And I remember telling my mom, like, Daddy, has other things going on. Daddy's seeing somebody else.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
At 8 years old.
I was like, Daddy has a girlfriend.
You said, what?
Daddy has a girlfriend.
So let's talk about this a little bit, because I remember being a little girl, and I remember one of my friends' fathers, at this time, they didn't have social media. And we were on the bus, and we saw her father's car at his girlfriend's house. And I remember it being a whole big discussion. And I don't know, in some kind of way, it got back to the mom. And we were about 8 or 9 years old then, too. So back then, it was not unheard of the children hearing and seeing this. So how did you find out that Daddy had a girlfriend, and how did you process that at 8 years old?
I found out, I remember, I think it was around Valentine's Day, and he had a card laid on the counter, and it had another woman's name on it. And that was kind of my first indication. And there were times when I would be with him, and he would be on the phone, and I knew it wasn't my mom. And so that sort of gave me this inkling that my dad maybe had this, this extramarital affair. But I didn't fully understand that it was wrong, because I had a very close relationship with my dad. And outside of that, I literally worship my father. My dad was very much present in my life and spent actually more time with me than my mom did, because my mom was very career focused. And my dad was retired from the military, so he was able to spend the time with me, taking me to and from school, taking me to after-school events, while my mom was busy working all the time. So there was some part of me, I think, too, that wanted to sort of protect him and her at the same time, because I knew that it would break her heart, but I knew also, too, that it was wrong. But I wanted my parents to both be happy, even if that meant that they were separated. Because my mom asked me, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay or do you want to leave? And I said, I'll go with you. I think you shouldn't be together.
So you were the one who told your mom? So what made you decide one day, I'm going to go and tell my mom this? Because I know that had to be a very difficult decision, and 8 years old.
You know how kids can be, they'll be like, hey, look at me, and then do a flip and then walk off. It was very, I remember this conversation with her was very casual for me. I literally just kind of just said it. And then she was like, oh, girl, hush. And my mom eventually found out on her own because the woman actually ended up calling our house, and it was chaos that day. And I remember when my mom left after she actually spoke to this woman on the phone and said, "Why do you keep calling my husband?" And that's when everything sort of came out officially. And, my parents did a lot of back and forth after that over the years. My mom left for a while. Eventually they tried to work it out, and, they got back together, and I told my mom that I didn't think that it was a good idea and that they just needed to separate.
Even though you were a daddy's girl.
Mm-hmm. Very much so, because me being a daddy's girl didn't mean that I didn't think that my mom deserved the best. One of my best friends growing up, I'd spent a lot of time with her family, and I really adored her parents and her dad as well, and I saw the way that her dad treated her mother. And you can be a great father and not be the best husband. And I wanted that for my mom too. And so, they did a lot of back and forth over the years. And finally, when I made it to high school, she finally decided like that was going to be, it. And she really, for herself, probably, I think, needed to create distance for it to really last. And so, eventually we moved to North Carolina, to Raleigh, and I can tell you I absolutely hated it.
You hated it?
I hated it.
Well, so what was about Raleigh that you hated?
It was a new environment. Growing up in Florida, I was around a lot of different people. I did go to private school, but I started going, when I moved over to high school, I went to public school, and it was very diverse. Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, everybody, all just kind of in one space. And when I got to North Carolina, at that particular time, the school district that I was in was very much separated from all of the Black people. I lived on the north side of town, and my mom went to the school district board and asked, what was a good district for us to live in so we could get a good school for me. And so that's where we moved to. And the school that I went to felt very much segregated, especially during lunchtime. I can remember walking in during lunch, and it was literally all the white kids over here and not all the Black kids over here. And I had been used to, just knowing and talking to everybody, and I wasn't sure really where I fit in. I was the new girl, and
new girl from private school to a public arena, so I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was tough. I got bullied, and high school was not great for me.
Did you still stay in touch with Dad?
Yeah, I did. I would fly down to see him, and every now and again he would come up to see me, so I maintained my relationship with him. But when I got to high school, it became very tumultuous because I finally started to realize the damage he had done to our family. Not only to my mom, but just to me as well. I had a lot of animosity towards him for breaking up our family. And it took us a long time to really, really work through that, from college, from high school into college, and even into my adulthood life.
Well, did Dad feel any type of betrayal with you going back and telling Mom? Sometimes adults, they put themselves in a place where a kid is, and they, why did you go back and tell her? Why didn't you just be quiet? Did you ever get that from your dad?
If he felt any way towards me, he never showed it directly. When he initially explained to me, that him and my mom are separating, I was like, oh, I know about the other person, and he started to laugh. He was like, you knew? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I can't get nothing past you. He actually thought it was quite amusing more than anything else. But, I think he did have regret later on in his life. He was diagnosed with cancer.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, and, at that point, he realized how much he needed his family and really my mom. And, when I became an adult and after school and all of that, we maintained our relationship. He would come to see me and we would talk, but I still sort of kept him at bay because I just felt like I couldn't trust him. And it felt like a betrayal to me. You're talking about betrayal. I think he betrayed us more than anything else. I mean, how are you going to put the responsibilities of the things that you do on your kid just because they knew, But, hurt people. And I think that my dad was broken in a lot of ways, which is ultimately, why he made some of the decisions that he made. And then the same for my mom as to why she did a lot of the back and forth with him and all of that. And, You know, there were a lot of times I felt like I was sort of replicating those same behaviors in relationships. You know,
Yeah, I was about to ask you that. So when you felt that hurt from your father, do you think that that's something that etched into your mind about what to expect from a relationship from men?
I think subconsciously, yeah. I think I always knew that I wanted more and I wanted something better and different from what their relationship was. But when you're exposed to something for so long, you know, you get into those same cycles and you don't even realize that you're in them too. So there were several times that I was in relationships where I was being disrespected and not treated right, and I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't even have a voice. I didn't know how to speak up or set boundaries and things like that. I just would constantly take it and take it and take it until things would just explode and blow up, and then finally I'm forced, you know, to leave the relationship. And my last relationship, things ended, and that was on my account, was in 2018 going into 2019, and that was a pivotal point for me because that was somebody that I was very much in love with and thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and I just was like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is it for me. I love you, but there is nothing that you can do to come back from all of the shit that you've done to me. This is it. And that still to this day has been probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. It took me years to really heal from that.
So I'm sure you probably looking back on it can think, you understand now why mom probably struggled. It's not as easy. Some people will say, just go, just leave. But I'm sure your mom had to deal with, okay, how she felt, also the children. And if your mom was also as successful as you said that she was, she probably had to think about the financial implications of leaving too. It's not as easy. People always say, well, just leave. It's not working. Just go and da-da-da-da. And it's just not that easy. And same thing for the situation probably on your father's side of the house as to why he probably decided, you know, it may be just easier for me just to have a friend because it's going to cost me too much to leave. And that's the part that a lot of people don't verbally discuss because I guess it's not biblically sound to say that. But that is a very real situation. Now, you did say in high school you did not enjoy your high school years.
Yeah. High school was rough. I got bullied a lot. Rumors were spread about me that were not true. And I think that there was a lot of jealousy involved from other girls and things like that. And I've always been a girl's girl. I always wanted to have girlfriends and just be around other black women, especially because I wasn't able to do that growing up. And yeah, I high school was not the best experience for me, but you know what? It made me extremely resilient and made me a lot more empathetic towards other people. And as a result, my senior year is when I first started competing in pageants, and that was what my platform was, an anti-bullying platform.
Okay. Now, is it true, because I often hear that pageantry is not always just about being beautiful, being pretty. Is that true?
Yeah, 100% true.
Okay.
And the other thing is, too, is like I really want people to get past sort of the superficial aspect of when they see pageantry. There can be vanity in it, and I've certainly competed with a lot of girls who focus mostly on that. But when you compete in a state, especially in North Carolina is a very competitive state. Going into the national level for the Miss USA competition, when everyone is beautiful, you have to have something else. And so there's 3 phases in the competition. So there's evening gown, there's swimwear, and then there's interview. And for me, my focal point was always my interview.
So if a person does a great job in the interview, but looks horrible in a swimwear, they still have an opportunity?
In truth, I'm going to be honest, I think it's a balance
Okay.
of all things.
Because I've never seen a bad swimwear person in a pageant. Now, I'm sure it's probably some, because I'm starting to see now a lot of people running around here with these sashes on. And I'm wondering what in the world is going on. So literally, because back in the day when you said pageantry and this is Miss So-and-so and Miss So-and-so, it was like, wow, this person not only extremely smart, well-spoken, but beautiful, right? And and you know, not to say that that's not the case, but what I will say is I noticed that there's been more we're letting more people in. We're being more open to that.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely changed over the years, because I would say back then it was very like pageant patty, where number one, it still is a beauty pageant, so they are going to look at you physically, because they're, you know, with the competition itself, you know, you're competing in swimsuit and evening gown first. They don't speak to you and do your interviews until maybe a day or two later into the competition, once they've decided who had, you know, stage presence, because there are some girls who are very beautiful on stage but have no presence. There's no essence or star quality to them. So the judges will, you know, mark and tabulate scores based on who is just appealing, but you have to still have a bit of an it factor.
And you started pretty late.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people, they start their kids off like John Benet Ramsey age, right? Yeah. 5-6 years old. And, you know, which is kind of eerie too.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, because I think it's one thing about making the kids, you know, learn the essence of being in a pageant, but I think you don't want to make them sexy. And I think that's what I was seeing with the kids. But for you to start in your senior year, did that put you in some type of disadvantage?
I think I thought it did, but I actually think it put me at an advantage, because the judges, I didn't have a chance to fake anything. I hadn't done anything that was overly rehearsed or something I'd practiced for so long. So I think I came in a lot more authentic.
Okay.
Because my first go around, I competed in Miss North Carolina Teen USA, and out of 96 girls, I placed in the top 10. And that was on my very first try.
Wow. So you knew then, okay, I'm working with something.
Yeah. It was a fun experience, you know, getting on the stage, and it really helped me with my confidence and all of that stuff, especially with bullying and being told, you know, things that made me feel like I was less than, you know, taken away from my value. And that pageant really showed me that you are something and you can be something in your future. You know, just stay locked in and, you know, forget all of the noise, you know. And so after I competed my senior year, graduated from high school and went on to college, I started to make that my goal. Knowing that I wanted to work in entertainment and all of those things, I knew that pageantry could potentially be an outlet for me. And so I waited a few years and, you know, started focusing on school and just getting myself together, you know, experiencing the world, studying abroad and that kind of thing. And then my senior year of college, I started to prepare to go back to compete again for the Miss Division.
Okay.
And
where did you go to college?
I went to NC State University.
Okay. Did you enjoy that? Was that
I loved college.
Okay. Did you pledge or anything?
I did. I'm an AKA.
Oh, so am I.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you had the full experience then. Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. So then you graduate, you begin pageantry again. And then I think at that point you probably had the bug and you said, I need to do a little bit more in the space of entertainment.
Yeah.
But what about mom and dad? Because I know mom and dad are probably thinking, wait a minute. We've invested in private schools. We've invested in college. We've paid for your initiations. We paid for all these pageants. And we put, because by the way, pageantry is not cheap. It is not cheap, from the entry fees to the gowns. Because each gown, you can't redo gowns at each pageant, I'm assuming. You have to have new gowns each time.
I would say back in the day you couldn't, but I would say in more recent years you can recycle things, especially too when you know you're going to get a different set of judges.
Okay.
And so actually that's really what I did. I spent years spending tons of money. I raised a lot of money as well to help fund my pageantry. But I would say my parents, between myself and my parents, we probably spent above 30 grand between dresses, clothing, hair, makeup, and then also training and those kinds of things, you know, walking lessons, and then doing mock interview lessons and things like that. The year I won is actually the first time ever that I had decided to recycle old wardrobe. And that's because I competed a total of 4 times. The first 3 times I placed in the top 10. And every single year, I invested in new swimsuits, new evening gowns, new interview looks, hair, you know, all of those things. And my final year, I almost didn't compete. I had done it 3 times at that point. And North Carolina, again, is a really competitive state. And also, too, only 4 black women had been crowned prior to me. And so my parents were feeling really disencouraged, thinking that maybe it just wasn't going to happen. And I was at a retreat maybe about 2 months before the pageant took place. And literally I was there at the retreat, and God gave me this vision of where I saw myself standing on the stage and they were crowning me. And it came out of nowhere. And it was like time stood still. Everything around me, everything disappeared. Every person disappeared. The facilitator disappeared, and I saw myself standing on the stage. And I've been praying about it, trying to figure out what I should do. And in that moment, I realized that God had given me my answer. And I said, well, I got like 50 days before this pageant is about to happen. What can I do to make this happen? And I recycled an old swimsuit that I competed in before. I found an interview dress for $25 online. And the man that designed my gown here in Atlanta, Randall Smith, I met with him, and he believed in me so much. He said, you're going to win this pageant. I'm going to make this gown for you now, and you can pay me later after you win. And I couldn't believe it. And I looked at him like, you really believe I'm going to win? He said, yes. I know you're going to win. Now you have to think that too. And without a doubt, that year came. And when I will say too, most of the years I had been a little bit nervous. I think I just wanted it so badly that I let my anxiety just build and build to where I didn't perform where I needed to, even with the top 10 placement. And that year I said a prayer. I got out on that stage right before they called my name. For the beginning of the pageant, I just said, Lord, take away this anxiety, work through me, let the judges see you in me. And all of my anxiety and my nerves left. That entire pageant, it felt like I was walking on water. It was the most bizarre experience in a good way that I've ever had. And that's, for me, was a confirmation too that I knew that God was real.
So spiritual. Are you a very spiritual person? Where do you lie in the spirituality realm? What are your beliefs?
So I was raised as a Christian and raised in the Baptist church and all those things. But as I've gotten older, I have become, I think, more non-traditional and more non-denominational as it relates to religion. I'm not a religious person, but I am a very spiritual person. Because it really is just about your own personal relationship. Nothing else matters. I am someone who is very big on prayer, very big on what I speak. You know, there's life and death in the tongue. And so for me, it's just really just about having a personal relationship with God, prayer, and then, you know, meditating. And then other things that I do, you know, throughout the years with my spiritual journey and my own growth is, and a lot of people, this may be even controversial for some, is I also practice yoga. And a lot of people consider that as a form of witchcraft and that sort of thing. And,
but you can go to many Christian retreats now, and they practice yoga. I think, and they call it Christian yoga and so forth. I think it's just, you know, what has happened over the years, many times, what people don't understand, they immediately demonize it.
And that's what it is.
And they just automatically put it into a box and call it witchcraft, where it's just a misunderstanding or you fully not understanding that person's relationship. But yeah, yoga allows you to feel what do you feel when you because you're a yogi, right?
I am a yogi.
Okay, so I'm using it right now. So what do you, because I know I see Russell Simmons is a big yogi too, right? So what is it that you feel as you're practicing?
100% at peace, 100% relaxed, and 100% at one with the I am. It's a space that a lot of people I don't think will ever 100% feel. And I'm not saying you need to do yoga in order to be connected to the source, but for me, that has really helped. And now because I've been doing yoga now for about 5 years, and I am even certified now too. It was something that really transformed my life. Because it also transformed my health. So I was diagnosed with TMJ, and don't even get me to lying on how to say that long word.
Okay.
But basically, it's where you have a severe form of lockjaw, to where all of these bones in your body and your jaw lock, and it creates a lot of tension in your head and can cause headaches. It's very debilitating. Headaches. I experience nosebleeds, inflammation in my scalp, hair loss, and it starts from stress. And for me, I was in desperate need of healing. And the doctor that performed a procedure to help give me more space in my jaw and also removed my wisdom teeth is the one that recommended I do yoga to sort of help maintain my recovery process. And I had done yoga before, but nothing, consistent. And so after the surgery, I started doing it. And within a week, I started seeing the benefits of how much more relaxed I was, how much more free I felt and liberated. And I did that for about a year, and it transformed my life in so many ways that I was like, I've got to learn this. I gotta know more about this so I can teach this to other people. Because ultimately, for me, it's about healing.
So let me ask you a question, though. How does your family receive it, though, if they're traditional Christians? And you mentioned the fact that many people misclassify yogis. Have you had to deal with that at all, as far as people not understanding in your family what it is that you do?
There's been some people, I would say more from my extended family, people who are I don't want to use the word religious, but they're, very much by the book, going to church on, Sundays and doing all of the things. And I did have someone who told me, she said that she thought it was witchcraft. And initially I wanted to debate about it. And then God immediately was like, just hush. You all are on two separate journeys. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. But my mom, wildly enough, she's very supportive. And I've actually had sessions with her where I worked with her one-on-one and trying to get her to relax. And then also, too, outside of the religious or spiritual aspects, yoga is about intention, because you always set an intention at the beginning of your practice, whatever that is. So if my intention is to pray to Buddha, then maybe it is witchcraft. If my intention is to pray to whoever that is not the source, that's not God, my Lord and Savior, then of course maybe it can be considered that. But it is about intention and really about your heart posture. And so I don't have to prove that to anybody. God knows where my heart is and what is in my heart. And my heart comes from a very pure place. So that's my focus. And so for me, that has been such a blessing. And I have had clients that I have worked with and people that have taken my classes who talk about how much of a blessing it has been in their life and how much of an influence and impact I've had as an instructor for them. And honestly, that's all I'm supposed to do, is just to be a vessel. Because in terms of health, flexibility, mobility, strength, and all of those things are beneficial to the body. And especially, too, for someone who has dealt with a lot of traumatic experiences, yoga helped me to sort of release those things. We hold a lot of trauma in our hips.
So you mentioned stress, and you're mentioning trauma. Did you experience a lot of that as a child, or was that later on in life?
Yeah, I would say as a child. Too, and as also into my adulthood, in relationships, and there were things that I saw my dad do. And my dad, as great as he was of a father, my dad, being in the military, was also very hard on me and raised me like one of his little soldiers. And he was at times very emotionally abusive too. And those things definitely carried over into my adulthood, being a people pleaser, always being hyper vigilant about trying to assess other people's emotions to make sure that I'm not doing anything to piss them off or make them feel uncomfortable. And as a result, I feel uncomfortable. So I'm holding on to all of these things and this tension in my body. And then, myself dealing with, abuse and things like that in relationships and all of that. So, yeah, I've dealt with so many different traumatic events. And while that may have happened, I'm at a point in my life and have been in that place, I would say, ever since I got to my 30s, that the generational cycles, the generational curses, I'm breaking them. All of that shit stops with me. It is my responsibility to fix those things and heal those things, which is why I'm not a mom yet, because when I do have children, I don't want my children to have to heal from something because of me
and this is the thing, because of you as a parent, right? Because the reality of it is no matter how much of a perfect person you are, a perfect parent, everybody has their own experiences. And I think experiences, they don't necessarily need to be traumatic, but experiences is what makes you, because without experiences, you don't really live. I kind of tell people this. I think, I often fear for my children to go through their first heartbreak, right? But at the same token, that's part of life. If you don't hurt, you don't love. If you don't feel, you don't know, you can't experience ecstasy, you can't experience any of those things unless you know what the downside is. And so that's all part of saying I was here. But I think the traumatic piece, the sad thing about it is so many African American women feel like that is a badge of honor that they must go through.
And it's not.
Right.
It's not. I really want us to get out of that. And that's why for me, like I said, like I want to be 100% healed, and I'm in my soft girl era now. I want to be, I am a princess. I want to be treated like a princess. I don't need to go through nothing with you for this to be great. It can be great from the start. And I love Black women so much, and I think that healing is really, really important. And you don't have to, it doesn't necessarily have to be from trauma. And, you know, even for myself, like I said, you know, wanting to be a parent one day, I know that I can't shield and protect my children from everything. But if I can show them what love looks like and what it should look like and what it should feel like, that maybe it'll help them with making the decisions and avoiding making some of the decisions that I have made and decisions that I've watched my parents make, so that that hurt and pain is just a little bit less, if anything else. But of course, you got to live your life, and without experience, you know, there's no growth there.
You know, I think one of the things that is important is that what you're saying is many times parents just say, I just have to live my life. It's about me being happy. I'm just going to do me, not thinking that the decisions that you're making, it is impacting your children. And it's not just about them understanding or experiencing divorce. It's everything else that goes along with that. So when you mention about the relationships and wanting to show your children what true happiness is, did you ever see did your father remarry? Did your mom remarry? Because I know you said you always dreamed of your mom being able to be in that relationship like your friends' parents. Did your mom ever find that?
No, she didn't. I think she's, and when I didn't, she hasn't. I think she's in a space where she's more open to it now. My dad is deceased. Ultimately, when he got his diagnosis and when things, you know, started to go downhill for him, he needed the both of us. And so after I moved to Atlanta, I ended up moving back in with my parents to help her take care of him. But she
So she went back.
Yeah.
So your mom was a true definition of a wife.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So even though she divorced him,
she never did officially.
Okay. So she never officially divorced him. But she really did her wifely duties to death do us part.
Yes.
And she actually went back, even though he broke her heart.
Yes. Time and time again. And she just said that this is what she felt like she was supposed to do. Because they lived 2 separate households, literally 2 homes, 2 mortgages, 2 everything. And we ended up literally moving my dad up from Orlando to Atlanta. And we took care of him the last year that he was alive. And I would say maybe 3 weeks before he passed. And, you know, when death is coming upon you, you start to think about things. And I remember he was very emotional and talking about his regrets and with she and I, and as well as with his other children. But because she and I were the closest to him at the time, you know, he said, I wish I could give you the world and I can't now. And that broke my heart hearing him say that. And, you know, him wanting to make amends and apologizing, and then, you know, saying, you know, baby girl, I love you, but I gotta leave you. I can't deal with this pain anymore. And it was really, really heartbreaking. But, you know, I told him, you know, Daddy, I love you and I forgive you, and I want you to be at rest. I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be fine. And the one promise he asked me to make was, I want you to maintain your relationship with your mother. Because the wild thing about it is, as I got older, things sort of flipped. Me and my dad began to heal our relationship and get closer. And my mom and I started to kind of bump heads a lot. And I think it's just, you know, a generational thing too. She was raised very differently. So in terms of staying in relationships and staying committed to something, even though it's bad for you, that's kind of where she is at. And I'm very headstrong. Like, I'm not putting up with anything. I will set boundaries. And that even includes me setting boundaries with my parents and her as well. And so for me, those are things that I live by today. I'm very big on boundaries. And that's something that I used to not be. And that's in every facet of my life, but specifically in dealing with relationships and dealing with romantic relationships. But I think it's important, setting boundaries so people understand how they are able to treat you, because you are sort of setting that tone. Because people, I think even on a subconscious level, sometimes will try to test you and see what they can get away with. And I've learned my self-concept has evolved, and I love myself. And I just I have had to fight to get here, fight for this peace, fight for this happiness, and I'm not willing to give that up. And I'll give you up before I give that up.
I understand that. I think, though, Mom, though, is a soldier. Because she really, truly lived out her vows.
She did.
And I think that's the part that people don't... I think today... Ashley, there's such a microwave view of relationships, including marriage. And your mom sounds like she had a little bit of that old school in her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that old school where to death do us part. Yes, he hurt me. But this is my role. This is my duty. And a lot of the younger girls today are saying, I'm not doing that. But that is... I think your mom has peace now, because you think about at the end, I'm sure when it was all said and done for your father, your mom knew that she did what she was supposed to do, right? And I just think that people give up so easily today.
I agree with that.
They give up so easily, yeah. And I think she found her way. Maybe, that non-traditional way worked for them. They lived in two different homes, two different ways, but it worked for them. And I know that you're saying, hey, that's not going to be my story. But Mom probably also doesn't want you to be alone. She, many times she's probably looking at her life and saying, I want you to find that person for you. So that could be the part of the disagreement at that point. And you're probably saying, hey, wait a minute, but I don't want that, that part of it all. So the thing about it in the grand scheme of things is that relationships are so complex.
They are.
It's very difficult to say what you would do and how you would do it and doing it over. And it's very few people who live this life of a fairy tale. And I think so many people...
I don't think there is such thing as a fairy tale.
If you look on social media, you would see fairy tales all over the place. Goals, goals, goals. And I think that is what's making people run for the border so quickly, because the moment that it doesn't look like social media, people want to go. But I think that is what so many young people are looking for, this fairy tale. A man, you coming home and roses are from the front door to the bedroom, the bath is drawn, you got Louis Vuitton bags every which way, there's a new car out front for Christmas, there's new diamonds on the front. And in the moment that he can't provide those things for you, you're saying to yourself, I have a loser on my hands. So, have you ever been in love before, Ashley?
Oh my God, many times.
Oh, many times, you think?
I would say three.
Well, you're lucky, because most people are lucky to have been in love. I'm talking about in love one time in their life.
I would say I've experienced it a few times in college. My college sweetheart, and then two others after. And I'm not saying I'm anti-relationship or whatever, because I'm in a relationship now, and I have been for a year and a half. And I will say that I think, and I've been in relationships longer than a year and a half, and I will say I think that this is the most successful one that I have been in. But it took me, so my last relationship ended in basically 2019, and I spent 2019 to 2023 single. Then that was intentional. And that was because I think I'd always been a habitual dater, so I really wanted to spend time by myself, to heal, to fix my stuff, so that my next relationship would be better. And
so what did you need to fix? When I often hear people say, I need to heal, I need to fix myself, but they never really expound. What exactly did you need to fix?
Well, the first thing is, I think when you're dating someone, they're gonna be mirroring you in some ways. So there's a lot of things I think you think it's you. And I'm not saying that the people that I dated, it was all them. There were things that I probably did too as well that was making the relationship difficult too. But then also too, there were red flags there that I ignored from the very beginning,
Such as
inconsistencies, disrespect, things like that. You know, men who don't necessarily keep their word, but thinking, you know, you make excuses for them. You give them grace and you give them patience when they're very much showing you who they are in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then also too, for me, you know, going along with things that I really wasn't okay with, and that's, you know, boundary setting, me not setting boundaries, me not speaking up when I wasn't okay with something, and then also too, also doing a lot of emotional regulation, where there would be times when something would frustrate me and I would just immediately go off the handle instead of finding a better way to address the situation. So it's not just one person. And so for me, going to therapy and really taking accountability for myself and getting a very clear picture about what it is that I'm actually looking for in a relationship. Because we, as women, you know, like you said, a lot of women have all these requirements. They want men to have the roses, the cars, the diamonds, the money, all these things. But you can't expect someone to have those things if you yourself are not putting yourself in a position to also have those things. And I'm not saying I have to be a millionaire to date a millionaire or vice versa. But what I am saying is that if you have these expectations, make sure that you can also meet certain expectations.
Is that your expectation? Does he have to be a millionaire?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
So let me ask you this. Are you one that has this list? You know, a lot of the young women who are out here dating today, they've been told, take your notepad out and you write a list of all the things that you want. And if this person doesn't meet all of these things, keep it going. Do you have a list?
I used to. I don't anymore.
Okay. What age were you when you got rid of that list?
I would say that was really just about a year or two ago.
Okay.
Because
So you really believe... So I remember having a conversation with my girlfriend years and years and years ago, and she had this list, and the moment that somebody did not meet one of those things on that list, she moved on. And I kept telling her, you're going to live a long, lonely life looking down this list. And she kept saying, I'm going to find that one specific... Fast forward, sister is still looking. And now she trying to put the list up, but nobody... You know, I mean, I'm just saying. So, you know, I'm glad that I'm not saying that you should relax your
standards. Yeah.
But
I have non-negotiables now. It's not so much as a list as it is non-negotiables.
Let's talk about your non-negotiables, because sometimes the non-negotiables may be a little stringent.
Okay.
So what are your non-negotiables?
Some of my non-negotiables is I need someone who is consistent. I need someone who is generous and kind. And
okay, stop. And generous means what?
Generous is someone who isn't selfish. They consider me and think of me, or are a giving person. And that doesn't mean in money. You could be a giving person by making sure that I'm attended to. Like if I ask you for a glass of water, if I'm busy, that you're kind enough to go and get it for me. Okay. It doesn't have to be anything major, because I'm a very giving and generous person. I think of other people. A lot of times I'm a very helpful person. I love giving and helping other people. And so I want someone who definitely can be that for me. But then also someone who, of course, is God-fearing, a person who is goal-oriented, but someone who I can also work with. And our families, I think, need to be able to mesh well. We don't necessarily have to be best friends, but we need to mesh well together. Before I had, specifics on my list of like, he's got to be this height, he's got to be this, he's got to be this and this and this. And honestly, for me, those things just started to become realistic. And what I realized too, and I've had people tell me this, and my therapist said it best, two things. First thing he says is like, when you find real love, he's like, love is actually really boring. It's not this highs and these lows. And he's like, we a lot of times get used to this function that when we find someone who doesn't give us butterflies all the time, we're immediately like, oh, this can't be it. He's like, get used to, settle in the doing nothing. Settle in someone who keeps you here all the time. And so for me, that was one thing that really stood out with my boyfriend. And it was kind of triggering because there were moments when I didn't feel that way. And I'm like, he can't be, it's he. And we're not married, so I don't know what will happen in the future, but I am very hopeful. because I had to sort of throw out all of these things that I've been told and these things that I believed and stuff that you look at on social media
and
all of
even
that.
your friends' parents, because you referenced that as a child. For some reason, their relationship stood out to you.
Yeah.
Right? And what you probably saw in that relationship was probably just their mom and dad knowing how to act because we had guests in the house.
And that's very, very true. Pointing that out, and I will say that they are still together to this day. And their relationship, I think, is still very much loving, but there's a lot of support in that relationship. And that's something that's super big for me. And I didn't feel like I was getting that. And that, for me, is now a non-negotiable, because I don't feel like I was getting that over the years in my relationships. It would appear that way, but as guys really got to get to know me and saw how invested I am in my acting career and the success that's been coming my way, it's actually been a challenge, I think, on their side to handle it. I had one guy tell me, he's like, you just get too much attention. And this is when I was a guy I was dating when I was Miss North Carolina. He was like, you get way too much attention. I need a mellow girl. And I'm like...
You know what ends up happening a lot of times, the same things that attracted you to them, then they want to change.
Yeah, then they resent you for it.
Right.
Then they resent you for it, which is wild. You knew who I was when you met me. This hasn't changed. And so, but I think the thing, for me that is important in my relationships too is the space, that we give each other. I used to be... afraid and that was me healing some of my abandonment issues. Like, if we're not talking all the time or texting or calling all the time, then something is wrong, or he's leaving, or he's whatever.
But where did the abandonment issue comes from?
I think from past relationships, but also too just the things that I saw happen between my own parents. So
do you really feel as if your mom abandoned your dad, or your dad abandoned your mom, or they just didn't work out?
I think that there were times when I felt like my dad abandoned us, because ultimately she left, but I felt like he chose this other person over his family. But she left, though, right? Yeah. But she always went back and forth. She's always allowed him room to come back in, and it just felt like he didn't choose us. You know
what else I think? I think at 8 years old, you were carrying too much weight.
Yeah. Oh, way too much for an 8-year-old.
Way too much weight. And that now is impacting you at 30-something years old. And a lot of times people don't understand. I saw an interview where Ayanna Van Zandt was talking with Trina Braxton's sons, and she was talking to him about things that he should not have been involved with at such a young age in his mom's marriage. And I was like, oh, Ayanna, you're doing too much, and da-da-da-da-da. But just sitting here talking to you, I see, because you carried so much that you could not process properly, that now is still impacting you at a later age. And that 8-year-old little girl probably thought it was abandonment, but really it just didn't work out. And so many times relationships just don't work out. And it doesn't mean that mom was a bad person or dad was a bad person. Yeah. It just didn't work out, right? And sometimes the seasons are up.
Yeah, and I don't see either one of my parents. I never saw either one of my parents as the villain in that story. I just knew that I wanted something different from my story. I don't have this fantasy or perception in my mind of what I think my relationship or my marriage will be, because I know it is a fight to stay in it, because it is very easy to give up. It's easy. It is. I think it is actually easier to walk away than it is to stay. Very much. And I'm learning that.
But then also knowing when.
Yeah. Okay? You gotta know when.
You gotta know when, because no one should be a doormat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what some people will take from the conversation, that we're saying, stay. We're not saying stay, but you have to know. So how do you know when it's time to pivot? How do you know when it's time to say, this is no longer serving me?
Wow, that's a really I think for me it's about discernment. And just there's something inside of you knowing that it's time to move on, where things sort of just keep happening, nothing seems to go right, and things become chaotic. And I think for me, when I look at my past relationships, when things just were always falling apart, everything I did, every time I put my best foot forward, I was always misunderstood. And nothing I could do was ever enough. And I think when you get to a point where there's nothing that you can do that's ever enough, is when you need to start to consider other things. And then also there's this little voice inside that will tell you. And I think if you're grounded and you're rooted in God, that voice will speak to you and tell you it's time to move on. And sometimes it takes many, many times going back, to God and to prayer or to whatever it is that you do to figure out what you need to do when you're trying to make a decision before you finally get it. But you'll know. Something instinctually inside of you will tell you, and you will know.
But how do you let go when you're in love?
It doesn't happen overnight. Every day is a new day to start over and to progress forward. I can tell you that there were many, many times when I fought wanting to go back to what I was used to and going back into situations that really didn't serve me. And I will say I'm also a very stubborn person. And for me, I'm very tunnel vision. And if I've made a decision, I will stand 10 toes down in that decision, even though it hurts me. I could miss you and you would never know. You were going to assume that I'm good, but I may not be good. There were many times I cried out at night and was frustrated. Sometimes I become a recluse and stay away from people when I'm dealing with, those sorts of emotions. But I will say is the work that I do is very fulfilling and brings me a lot of joy and happiness. And so I try to focus on the things that will always bring me that. Because if I do that every single day, the pain and the hurt will slowly dissipate to where one day I don't feel it anymore.
Right. And that probably also has helped you in your space of being an actress.
Yeah.
Right? You feel like you kind of step into a whole nother being in a sense. Since then, you've gone on to live a very successful life as an actress, done work with Tyler Perry, to name a few. But, as you know, Coinology is all about the person. And what's behind all of that. And so I really appreciate you coming in today and really sharing those things. But let's talk a little bit about what's next for you, right? What do you see? What's next? I know you mentioned children, family. What do you see? What's next for Ashley?
You know what? It's funny, that there's this saying, you tell God your plans and watch him laugh. I know whatever is next for me is going to be great. As far as my acting career goes, I have done a lot of really amazing things thus far. Like you said, working with Tyler on a TV show, and then, doing movies, and then, the movie I just had come out on Tubi called Toxic Harmony. I think what's next for me is more of that, and more of really finding my lane as an actor, and telling the type of stories that I want to tell. I do a lot of writing as well and have my own production company, so I've been working on some original content that I'm going to be, pitching to networks and things like that. But yeah, movies, television, but then also too, I'm still someone who's very big on using my influence and using my platform to be a blessing and to give back to other people. So I want the stories that I tell to be stories that are going to make a difference in people's lives, but then also from a resource standpoint, using my resources to literally give back to people. I started something called Project Christmas on Me, and that was actually in honor of my father. And initially my target audience was helping veterans because he's a veteran, but really what I've been doing every year is just blessing a family or families, multiple, depending on what comes my way, and providing whatever they need, and their Christmas is literally on me. And that's something that I want to grow and expand to where we're doing things year round. It's not just for the holidays. It's literally giving back to the community. I have a heart too for the homeless community as well, and I really want to build centers so that they can get back on their feet, a place where they can come and lay their head. And there's a lot of places like that now, shelters that give you, something to eat, and give you a place to stay. But I want something that's going to go a step further than that. We're going to give these people the resources so that they can get back on their feet and contribute to society. I am a person who is very, and some people call it socialism. Me having a heart for people and wanting to do good and bless people is being a socialist. You can call me that all day long. I care about people, and a part of why I do what I do as an actor is because I want people to see us more. The people who don't have a voice, people who have come from these marginalized communities or homes, broken homes. That's sort of what brings us all together, because I feel like we're in a state in life where we have forgotten that we really are all one. Yeah,
I want to say this too. I think that in the U.S. we've done a really good job of making certain words bad. Capitalism, they make it bad. Socialism, bad. I don't necessarily think I don't think a person is wrong because they're a capitalist. If that's their belief, if you believe in socialism, that's your belief. But we've made it very much a good or a bad thing, and I think that is another problem we have in this country. But let me ask you this in closing, because this is directly in relation to your career. You know, right now Hollywood is seeing a major shift. And I question if Hollywood will look the same at the end of 2025. Have you started thinking about that and thinking about reality is, you know, what does this look like for my career moving forward?
Yeah, I have. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have a direct answer for that, because we are in unprecedented times. A lot of things have changed, and I do think that COVID probably was sort of the start of that, because that's when everything just stopped. Nothing was going on for the better part of a year or more, and then even after that, things were very slow. And then we had the strikes last year, which really took a toll on the industry more than COVID did. It can be unsettling and a bit scary.
It's not only just COVID and not only just the strikes, but the folks that we saw as the overarching overseers, they're being called to the carpet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you got Weinstein, you got Diddy. There's questions floating around about Jay-Z. There's questions floating around about, you know, many others, right, that have not been, implicated yet. Neither has Jay-Z. But these are people, Clive Davis. These are people that we grew up with, and we had them on Bill Cosby. We put them on pedestals. And now they're being called on the carpet, so much so that they're in prison cells right now.
That's where they should be.
Yeah. So it's a lot of things are going to be different. A lot of things are going to change, and we don't know what that will look like. But I do know that if you are in the entertainment industry, you have to be very vigilant and pay very, very close attention to what the future looks like. I think that's why I love platforms like the Tubies and IHQ Network and things like that, because those type of platforms allow for a more diverse group. It's not necessarily just those that have been chosen and given the opportunity. It's giving other people who normally would be kept out of the opportunity a chance to be seen and heard. So I just, all that to say is that I would be very curious to see what the entertainment industry will look like by the end of this year.
Yeah. The tide is definitely changing, and I would say more than anything else, it is because of social media too, because it's kind of a catch-22 when you have social media. There's so many great things about it, but then there's a lot of, you know, bad things like the misinformation, and then also the negative influences that, you know, put these pressures as far as like standards, you know, that we should live up to. But I think it's going to give the power back to the regular people. Instead of, you know, the Diddies and all these people in power who probably should have never have been there. Everybody puts their pants on the same. So why can't I run a studio the same way that these other people did? Why can't I give other people jobs and give the green lights to projects and all that kind of stuff and tell different kinds of stories? Versus what we see on television, you know, every single day. So I think all of the things that these people that have been in power is being taken from them and given back to regular people. And that's really the way that it needs to be. The celebrity worship shit needs to go. I've never been into that. And I've never been on a set where I was just in complete awe of someone. And I've worked with some really amazing people. And yes, you know, Tyler, too, for example, working with him, was an experience for sure, but I was there to work. I wasn't there to brown nose. I wasn't there to get his attention or to be buddy. My focus was doing the work only. And if we can get back to just focusing on doing good work, and just really just being good people, be a good person. Don't have these weird, wild intentions. Just if you do good work and you are a good person, you are talented, you are going to be blessed. And not only will you be blessed, your blessings will overflow and it will help other people. That's what the focus should be about. All this other extra stuff is just, it needs to go. So I'm okay. Lock them all up as far as I'm concerned. Lock them all up.
Lock them all up.
Yeah, because what are we doing in 2025 where we're still using baiting people with sex and asking for favors and all that kind of stuff? It literally doesn't make sense that you are led as a leader to make your decisions and to use your influence to get what you want from people by asking for sexual favors. Just is wild to me and very immature. You need help.
And I will say this. These are all allegations.
Yeah, and allegedly.
Allegedly.
Let me put that out there.
And I will say this too, as a media person, I also know that media can shape narratives that may or may not be true. And for instance, Diddy is behind bars. Yes, they say they're keeping him behind bars to keep him from hurting potential, but also keeping him behind bars keeps him from being able to clear his name.
That's very true.
Able to rebuttal what's being said about him, because I think everybody has a right to say if it's true or not. I think the only thing about Diddy is that his credibility will be called into question because he specifically said that he had never done these things that we clearly saw on tape that he did.
Yeah, there's a lot of gaslighting in there too.
Correct. But again, he's not being charged right now for what we saw on that tape.
And that's true.
Right.
I
would just be very careful because the powers that be can formulate a narrative that may not be true.
And there's more to it, I think, that and I don't even know if we'll get the full story because I'm hearing a lot of different things too on the powers that be that were trying to retaliate, I think, against him. I don't know that we'll ever get the full truth, and I'm going to be real honest. At the end of the day, whatever is done in the dark, I think will come to light. But until those things are brought into the light, one thing I do very well is mind my business. I will pray for you, and I hope that those who need justice get their justice. But ultimately, all I can do is just put one foot in front of the other and do what I can do as Ashley.
That's right.
And hope that makes an impact and makes a difference, because there's a lot of evil and chaos and confusion in this world, but there is a lot of great and a lot of good and a lot of light in this world too. And despite everything, I try not to be too much of a cynic and focus on those things too.
Well, Ashley, it has been great. Thank you so much for coming out today. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Coinology. Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.
You ain't getting no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one.
Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.